could this Alabama program be one that fades as we get further and further away from the Nick Saban era? Not to say they'll ever get back to that level of dominance, but even the national title conversation, as we get further and further away from Nick Saban, will the power of that A, that script A, that everyone talks about, that truthfully has like a Dallas Cowboys effect on college football? Is it time to panic about Alabama? Is it time? Can we have that conversation? Is it time to panic about Alabama? For a multitude of different reasons. There's the immediate concern. The immediate concern are the people that are holding Kalen DeBoer's life in their hands at Alabama, are they ones that are comparing him to Nick Saban with their crimson-colored glasses, the ones that have been so accustomed to national championships, the dynasty of Alabama, the Crimson Wall, all these different things? Are those people comparing Kalen DeBoer to Nick Saban? Because if they are, 2026 is a make-or-break season, and I don't know if they've done enough in the portal to really justify the fact that they are going to be significantly better in 2026. Now, the areas that they can get better, even though they're replacing their quarterback, wide receivers, running backs, offensive linemen, defensive line, all these different pieces on the team are getting replaced. If they could be consistent, that would make a wealth of benefits for them. I mean, truly, the only thing that has been consistent about Alabama football during the Kalen DeBoer era has been their inconsistency. You could rely on the volatility. You could never predict it. Truthfully, a lot of people thought if they were just triple touchdown favorites that they were going to have a bad game, and if they were dogs, they were going to have a good game. And even then, it didn't really make sense. I mean, just look at 2025. You beat Florida, or you lose to Florida State in a game that you should not have lost. You got smacked around in the second round of the playoffs where it didn't look competitive. Same could be said for the SEC championship. But in the same breath, you had the moment of going into Athens and beating Kirby Smart and that Georgia team. You got to the SEC championship. You were able to win a college football playoff game on the road against Oklahoma in what was a very impressive game overall. The ups and downs of Alabama football has to calm down. It feels like the emotions are just way too high. And I think of this time and time again. When they played Georgia in Bryant-Denny the first time, I remember the commentators, and I think it was Kirk and the crew, were pointing out that, like, Alabama in pregame warm-ups, you know, when you think of Nick Saban's Alabamas, you thought of the business trip. When they stepped into that away arena, or when they were facing off against a top opponent and all the hype and noise, College game days probably there, it felt like it was consistent. Kind of similar to what we see with Indiana, where no matter what is going on the outside, the emotions never flared up. It was always consistent, even, cool. No change in emotion. Yeah, you had intensity, but it never felt like you were really letting the moment get to you. You didn't really let the moment drive the conversation or your effort. It really feels like with Kalen DeBoer and this team, the emotions were always flaring, and that's where that inconsistency gets rooted in. So I think at its core in 2026, you want more consistency, but that's not why I'm concerned. I'm concerned because you didn't have the greatest transfer portal class. I don't think you have been able to elevate the talent roster to get to the same level. But at its core, for the long term, Alabama is not a huge threat in NIL. They're not. If you have been following Nick Saban for a long time, especially towards the end of his career, he complained time and time again with administration and state legislators to really open up the checkbooks for Alabama. And if you don't want to take my word for it, and you don't want to believe me, A.J. McCarron, quarterback, former Alabama Crimson Tide, one of the greatest Alabama quarterbacks in their school's history, even detailed it himself on a podcast saying their budget's sub $20 million. We're hearing 40 million, 60 million from like Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Oregon, all these different spots. And your budget's sub 20 million. You're not going to be the package that is going to be the most enticing in terms of NIL funding. The same thing could be said with Cam Coleman. Hollywood Smothers got ripped away from you from one of those big powerhouses. This happens. This is what is going to happen. That you are not going to be the team that's going to dominate on the financial side. Now, do you want every single player that just wants the biggest bag? But sure, it does help, because the other part of what AJ McCarron said, where he said, going to Alabama wasn't ever about making the most money. It was about development. It was about winning. It was about coaching. It was about championships. Problem being, a lot of that merit was built up with the guy that's on College Game Day. It's not with the guy that's currently there. And Kalen DeBoer, it would probably help him a lot more if he was more of a weapon in the NIL space and could throw out some more money to really overpay potentially for some of these guys. He can't do that. Alabama is not a force in the NIL space. And I worry it may limit them in the long term. And I begin to worry maybe on the short term, he's going to get compared to Nick Saban a little bit too much. And the standard's going to be too high. And then we look at 2026 and the roster maybe isn't the one that, or the portal isn't where it needs to be. It's not all doom and gloom, to be fair, in roster management. Number 2, high school recruiting class coming in. But in 2026, those true freshmen is not what's going to save your job. It's what may help you in the long term. It's always the building blocks, but you got to go win now. And it's unfortunate for a guy that's going to be, I guess he went to an SEC championship last year, won a playoff game this year. The standards are going to be so high. It's following up Tom Brady, man. It's the world we live in. It's easier said than done to just separate the two and really have separate expectations. When you think Nick Saban-led programs, you have an expectation. But when you put them back to back and they're right next to each other, not everyone could be the Green Bay Packers and just swap out the most important position and everything's fine. That's just not the world we live in. There could be some struggle here. And I really begin to question if Alabama doesn't make, changes at their core to adapt to what college football is now, which is easier said than done. Could this Alabama program be one that fades as we get further and further away from the Nick Saban era? Not to say they'll ever get back to that level of dominance, but even the national title conversation, as we get further and further away from Nick Saban, will the power of that script A that everyone talks about, that truthfully has like a Dallas Cowboys effect on college football. You're always going to get the benefit of the doubt. People do with them against Indiana. It's like Indiana isn't going to beat them. It's the Alabama. It's the Crimson Tide. It's that script A. And guess what? Sometimes it doesn't matter, because football still has to be played. Not the logos, not the history. Those aren't what's being played on the football field. If you're not going to be a competitor in terms of funding and you're being held to such a high standard, like Kalen DeBoer is a very solid coach. Do not get it twisted. I think he's a great coach. I think he's in a very, very difficult position, and that this Alabama job might not have been as enticing as we originally thought.